Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good evening everybody, and welcome back to the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship, which for this week is going to be a man's slow descent into madness. My name is Ron Mullins, all by myself here in the commentary booth tonight, and in the virtual production hall we have our producer Josh Wilkie, who I can imagine after this broadcast is going to be a changed man after having to listen to one man have a conversation with himself for the next hour and a half. He'll essentially be listening into a virtual insane asylum here tonight, so if anyone in the YouTube chat would like to send some prayers to our producer, I'm sure he would appreciate that very much. So usually at this stage of the show, I would pass it off to my colleague Aaron, who is unfortunately absent with me. I don't know what happened to him, maybe had bird flu. Whatever it may be, he is not with us, so I'll just have a conversation with myself and talk you through this track, which is one of the most iconic, not only in the world of sim racing, but in the world of global motorsports as well. Spa-Francorchamps, one of the most historic circuits in all of the world. It's been operational since I think the 20s, or well, it was, I think, the late 20s when Spa was first used. Of course, for the longest time, it was a street circuit, but now it is a permanent layout. Even with this layout that we have now, which was basically introduced back in 1980, I believe, when they shortened the circuit down and cut out the run going through the very fast streets and cut the layout down by, I think, half the length. It was temporarily still a street circuit with the section between turn 15 all the way up until the end of the Kemmel straightaway heading into Lake Holm actually being public roads. But now it is a fully closed off, fully functional Grand Prix circuit, the host of the F1 Belgian Grand Prix every single year, and tonight the host of the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship. You know, I was talking with my colleague Aaron last week for the Nürburgring broadcast, which you may want to check out after this race, because that was an absurd night of racing action we had there. I pretty much said how this track is going to be, I think it's going to be one of the most chaotic races we've seen so far this season. It'll be akin to Silverstone like we saw earlier on in the year, just because of the absolute overabundance of drivers fighting for the slipstream. We're seeing it right now with Victor Kolmala, and I believe that's Theodore Bergeson, trying to let some cars by to have a big hole in the air once they start this lap. Coming out of turn 1, coming out of La Source, and then going through a Rouge, Radion, and then down the Kemmel straightaway. That is incredibly important. This track is so fast. Formula 1 teams roll out their low downforce packages in real life whenever the series runs here, so here in the sim, that is no different. So we're following Victor Kolmala, who's actually making his return to the series. We haven't seen him as of late. We have seen his teammate, Vetty Wheelman Wellham, as I like to call him. He is has been the star of the show, actually won the feature race last time out at the Nürburgring. And Kumala, we were thinking, me and my colleague Aaron were kind of speculating that maybe the reason why he wasn't making his appearance in this series was just down to the fact that the Wave Italy racing team decided to separate the two of them. Those two teammates, both drivers from Finland, actually came to blows 2 races in a row. They crashed running, I believe it was 3rd and 4th in the dying stages of the feature race at Silverstone, and they came to blows with a very comfortable P1 and P2 result in Okayama not very long ago. So after that, we didn't see Victor Komala for the last 2 rounds. However, we have seen his teammate, who I believe is running up towards the front of the pro standings. We'll take a look at the championship standings right now after I grab a quick little sip of water here. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that hydration is very, very important for you. Do not want to blow out my vocal cords. That's definitely something I now want to do since we have an hour-and-a-half long broadcast. I don't know why my grammar was all of a sudden failing me there. So I believe we'll be getting some championship standings here in just a few moments. And there it is. It's Archie Heron at the front for Alpha Esports at a 506 points right now. Pretty decent gap between himself and Vetty Willmanuelen, who did not show up in the first race of the season. He's at 484 points. A pretty substantial gap between those two and Centurk in P3. Then you can see Burgesson and Calix Poon, who said after the race at Bathurst a few weeks ago that he wasn't going to be a main fixture of the series. However, we have seen him ever since. I believe he is running with us tonight as well, so he's currently P5 in the championship standings there. And I think we'll go through some of the other runners here. You can see the rest of the pro standings. 17 drivers currently in that small little graphic we had there. Pro-Am is pretty close right now. Jelt Heldorn at the front of that championship category in the Pro-Ams, 477 points. A pretty decent gap between himself and McFarquhar in P number 2, and then Askell Larson there in P number 3 in that class. Only 7 points separating McFarquhar and Larson, with Alexander Michelson, who actually finished last week's race upside down. He still ended up on the lead lap, even though he was upside down at one point. He's currently P4 in the championship standings, with Mark Van Dalen rounding out your top 5. And we'll take a quick look here at the AM category, which is still incredibly close. Labinson right now is only 20 points ahead of Tim Runn in P2. Jay Walsh has put together a fantastic season, currently P3. He's been an underdog on these broadcasts, though, so far. He is currently P12 in this qualifying session, about halfway through. He is a really good driver to keep our eyes on. It's a little bit of a feel-good story whenever he makes it into the A-main, whenever any of the AM drivers really make it into the A-main. I believe the most we've seen make it into an A-main, the feature race, so far this season is probably about 3 or 4. So when it comes to that AM fight, just making it to that main show is so important when it comes to that championship fight. But as I said, we are in this qualifying session right now. 6 minutes, nearly 6 minutes on the board right now. It's currently Oddstall at the front of the standings at 2-minute 20.7, but we're following Theodore Birchson right now, who's on a cooldown lap. I think what he's trying to do right now is not essentially cool off his tires, but more cool off his engine. You want to be in that draft. The draft, as I mentioned at the start of the show, is so important. So I think maybe we may see a little bit of overheating when it comes for the races we have coming up later on today, which I should probably touch on the format after I make this point. We may see some drivers just swap positions, more akin to like a NASCAR style tandem draft race back in the early 2000s when they had to swap positions just to prevent their motors from blowing up. But as I said there, we do have the format of these races: 2 heat races where the top 6 move on and punch their tickets into that A main. We've got 2 10-minute long heat races, then we've got a B main where the drivers that didn't punch their tickets into the main show in those heat races get sent down to that race where they will absolutely claw and fight for every single position that they absolutely can. And then we'll have a pretty decent field, a very strong field for the A main later on in this meeting here at Spa. So we're following Jay Walsh going on to this back not so straight away between turns 15 and 19. Actually, it's turns 15 and the 18 and 19 complex of what used to be called the bus stop. Some people still call it the bus stop, even though it's not really a bus stop. It's just a generic chicane, but still, it's a very interesting corner. When I was watching these drivers drive around this track and practice earlier on tonight, I was seeing many go off there, hit those killer curbs on the inside, which you definitely do not want to do, especially if you're battling for a transfer spot later on in tonight's meeting. So right now it's still Oddstall at the front of the point. After the 10 minutes is up, after that checkered flag comes out, all these drivers go immediately back to the pit. So it's not like Formula 1 or something like that where these drivers have a bit more time. They need to start their last lap with, I mean, if they start with 9 minutes and 59 into the session with 1 second left to go, they'll still be able to finish their qualifying time. Here it's different. After 10 minutes, boop, you're done and you are ready to go for this race regardless of what qualifying time you set. Wellen right now at the bottom at a 2-minute 26.6. That is not a very good lap time from him. I don't believe he is on track currently, so that is not a good result at all for the man that's currently running up towards the front of the pro standings right now. As I And neither do I, which could explain why most of the filters I use in my house get dissolved after a few months, I should say. We're following Calix Poon, currently P4 in this session. The slipstream is so important, but he's not getting any right now. These drivers are on their last lap, so it is absolutely crunch time right now, and it's not looking good in the slightest for Wellen, now P20 in the standings in this qualifying session right now. Not sure what in the world happened to him. I don't know if he has some sort of penalty that he has to serve, having some kind of technical issue, because I mean he set a banker lap, so unless he's currently on track right now, which our graphics would disagree on, as you can see his name is a little bit grayed out there, that means he is in the pits right now, so that would not be a good result at all. However, if he doesn't have a technical issue and he will be joining us in this heat race, that is going to be one heck of a storyline that we'll have to follow in that 10-minute long heat race. We're following Adriansons right now in the number 150 car going into this final chicane here. Very careful to try not to snag a wheel and run wide as the driver ahead just did. Wellen, right as I was saying that he was going to be out of it, he goes to the top of the running order there. So he was actually on track and set a lap in the dying stages of this session, 1/1000th of a second ahead of Archie Heron there in P2. So I'm not sure why in the world his name was grayed out from my perspective, but still there's Harvey Jones now jumping ahead to move to P1 in the standings with just a few seconds left to go. Harvey Jones grabs a pole position for this Spa round, but now the field gets split into two, and we're going to get the grid for you for this heat race in just a few moments time. This is going to be pretty interesting, especially the run into turn number 1, which I believe is one of the shortest on the F1 calendar and will be one of the shortest that we've had so far this season. So the checkered flag has come out in this qualifying session. As I catch my breath here and get braced for the racing that we have in store. Harvey Jones at the front, Archie Heron there in P2, reigning champion Theodore Burgesson in P3, Lewis Gordon in 4th, Jetson Adriansons in P5, Askell Lordson in P number 6, Adriansons, 2 Adriansons in P5 and P7. That's definitely not going to be confusing. Coming into this race, Zootwell, the top running AM in P number 8, Run in 9th, and then Labinson in 10th. So you've got 3 AMs running back to back to back to back, and that's Van Dalen in 11th, Amblard in P12, and we'll go through. I believe we only have a few more drive. Actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that may be the rest of the grid there. So we have the 12 cars that you see on that grid, on that small little graphic that we had there. So we're going to have a somewhat smaller field compared to what we saw in some of the heat races earlier on in the year. However, we are in for a pretty good race. You can see now the drivers are lining up on the starting grid now. Just a few more drivers left to pop their way onto the grid. Some mind games that we may see here and there with some of these drivers trying to psych each other out. I would invoke drag racing terminology, but my dad watching this broadcast downstairs would probably yell at me and go off on a 40-minute tirade about how I managed to screw it up. So only 12 cars here for this first heat race. We're still waiting for just a few more to pop onto the grid. I believe we have a full grid now, so in just a few moments time we're gonna get the lights here. The lights are about to go off in just a few moments time. The 5 lights are on, now they're out, and the drivers are on their way into turn number 1. It's a pretty good start there, pretty even keel start from both of your front row sitters. We're seeing some drivers shuffle around farther in the back, but that's a good start there for your pole sitter of the number. I can pull up my live timing screen right now, even though I'm very much struggling to. It's Harvey Jones, your pole sitter, leading the field when they go into Eau Rouge and Radion. We see some bump drafting already. These drivers simply do not have a fear of death, and going side by side into Eau Rouge. See some drivers going off the track already. They will have to serve a slowdown, and they will drop back like a rock. But we got some side-by-side battling here at the front of the running order now. Archie Heron dropping back to P number 2. He's now allowed. Actually, no, it's Archie Heron moving up to P1. Harvey Jones dropping down to P number 2. We got some drivers nearly going 4 wide, entering La Source this time by. That's not La Source, that's Lecombe there. Oh, we already got drivers spinning and drivers going all the way off the circuit. That's Labinson, I believe we were riding on board with right as he made contact there. That's a very bizarre accident. We'll have to take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened there. But already drivers coming to blows. I saw a driver with a big, you could call it a smoke screen tactic, shall we would, to invoke, I guess, Maury. Actually, no, that I think that would be James Bond terminology there, invoking the smoke screen, coming through the Lecombe chicane for the first time by. But already drivers on the back foot after this race. I mean, we're not very long. I mean, we have 10 minutes of this race. No, I don't have 10 minutes left to go. We have about 8 minutes now left on the clock, considering how long they are around this lap. There's still a pretty decent amount of time for these drivers to contend and race with each other, but already these drivers coming to blows with each other, still trying to claw up some positions here. We're seeing some drivers go side by side and nearly going side by side, going through the far end of the circuit that I believe is named Fagnes. Really annoying any French speakers in the YouTube chat with my terrible and rural hick American pronunciations here, but going side by side before they're about to enter Blanchimont in just a few moments' time. They managed to go single file there, so I think these drivers realizing that, hey, it's too early to risk it. This is a lead pack fight that we're seeing some drivers go side by side. Already Burgess trying to go for a move. Actually, no, Burgess is farther in the back, and now he's trying to go for a move, going 3 wide, exiting that final chicane and starting the second lap. Already we see drivers going 3 wide into turn 1 this time by. This is a fight of Gordon, Jones, and Burgess is going to lose out on that fight. Lewis Gordon grabs P2. Meanwhile, Archie Heron is starting to pull away about a half a second gap, around 0.6 of a second really, between himself and Lewis Gordon. It's a Brit 1, 2, 3 currently in this race, with Burgess in at P4 right now. So I think we'll take a look as we see some drivers blinking on my screen. Hopefully my American connection is just doing some of those drivers, internet providers, a little bit dirty here, but we're taking a look at a replay of the schmozzle that happened here, heading in through the Lecombe chicane on the first time by. I don't think many drivers picked up severe damage from that. I didn't see anyone go on their lid, go on 2 wheels, but there's definitely a little bit of argy-bargy action, so I'm sure some drivers farther in the back definitely have some front wing damage. That was probably the most detrimental to Labinson, who went for that full spin and lost out on that fight more than anyone else. He's currently 13 seconds, actually now 14 seconds back of Archie Heron in the lead of this race. We're taking a look at another angle. This is riding on board with Labinson now going in to the Lecombe chicane, and it's just a big stack up here of cars. Ooh, that was a little bit of a spin there, and a lot of argy-bargy action there so early on into the race. It all started with a small little spin. I'm not sure if netcode was involved in that spin happening. However, oh, good lord, that's Lewis Gordon blinking out from my perspective. I think it's also blinking from my our producer Josh's perspective as well. So I think he may be having some kind of internet connection that may spook the likes of Archie Heron or Harvey Jones or Theodore Burgesson in really trying to challenge him, because if you have a car that's blinking out like some kind of screwed up PowerPoint presentation, then you might not want to try and go for a move side by side. However, from Gordon's perspective, he's feeling quite racy now, going side by side into Blanchimont. This would be the worst time to have a blink, as he's going side by side with Archie Heron through one of the fastest corners on the racetrack. Both them going side by side has brought Harvey Jones into that fight. You can cover all 3 of these cars with a blanket as they go into the chicane for the second time by. We're already 4 minutes and 40 seconds into this race. Some drivers shuffling around farther in the back back. Currently, the transfer spot, the final transfer spot, is held by Amblord, who has a 7/10 of a second gap between himself and Zootwell, so that's a pretty good margin that he has right now, but it's definitely not comfortable. He will have to push as hard as he can to try and extend that gap, especially now as we're seeing Van Dalen and Zootwell go side by side and battle quite hard. Heading into Lasaurus, this is a time that Amblord needs to strike, while the Iron Toddy's actually now battling with Adrian Sins to try and make it a all-pro top 5, and he has done that before they go into Rouge and Radion. But he's going to be a sitting duck going down the camel straightaway this time by. He already has that slipstream. They're already going side by side, and who's going to prevail in this fight, Adrian Sins or Amblord? They're still going side by side. It's going to be a battle of the last late breakers heading in to the Lacombe chicane this time by. Adrian Sins is going to have the inside line, which is going to turn into the outside, then back to the inside. So as long as he holds it on, which he has done, he'll be on the inside here and will be able to get that move done. But now Amblord has fallen into the crutches of Zootwell, who's now trying to look for a move around the outside of him. Now, meanwhile, Amblord, well, I thought he was going to try and make it 3 wide there and go for a move on Adrian Sins around the outside, while Zootwell was trying to go around the outside of him. That would have been very bold if those two drivers did that. However, I think if those two drivers did that, we would have seen 3 F4 cars spear off the side of the road in a ball of fire. But right now, Van Dalen is feeling quite racy right now. I have a good feeling about him because these 3 drivers are battling quite hard. Zootwell also running in a good position right now. P7 close to that final transfer spot as we're seeing them go side by side, coming through into turn number 12, going through Fanier this time by Zootwell. If he pulls this off, he would be one of the only, well, he would be the only AM driver to punch his ticket into that A main. It's a very upsetting result right now for Tim Runn, currently P10. Not a lot of hope for him to make it to the main show. Still going side by side is Adrian Sins and Amblord. I'm surprised with how often they've been side by side this lap. They haven't just been swallowed up by Zootwell and Van Dalen. They're still going side by side. About to enter Blanchimont this time by. Is anyone going back out of it? None of them do. And they keep it within the boundaries of the racing surface. As quite impressive. But Zootwell looking, I thought he was going to try and go for a move down the inside going into the chicane. But what he really needs to do is size these two up and figure out any sort of way that he can get past them. With how hard they're battling, they could come to blows. It won't be the most shocking thing in the world from this season. Amblord currently in P5. We'll see if that changes here. Meanwhile, we've got some battling farther up the road. I believe now Heron is in the lead, Gordon in second, and Jones in P number 3. And that was very hard stuff exiting Lasource this time by. They're still going side by side with this fight for the final few transfer spots. They're slowing each other down quite a lot. Amblord's 8 seconds behind Heron in P number 1, but you can see 5 cars now. You can cover them all with a blanket. Adrian Sins is involved in this fight. We've got 2 Adrian Sins, an Amblord, a Zootwell, and a Van Dalen here, and they're going 3 wide, nearly 4 wide. They are going 4 wide, going down the camel straightaway. These drivers simply do not fear death, and they're still going to be 4 wide, and there's a lot of contact there. Who was that? I believe that was Zootwell, if I'm not mistaken, that just got sent off the track. He'll be cutting the chicane and will definitely have to serve some kind of major slowdown if he doesn't have some kind of major suspension damage, which would not shock me in the slightest. That was a massive hit there. Popped him up. I believe he was just riding on one wheel. We're taking a look at a replay now, and ooh, yep, that was a very hair-raising moment for Gian Zootwell in the number 335 car. That is not something you want to have happen to you heading into one of the fastest and most challenging braking zones of the entire season, really. That's one of the most important braking zones and one of the hardest braking zones of the season with these F4 cars, essentially at terminal velocity. But that is such a shame there for Zootwell, who's now dropped down to P11. It looks like unless Tim Runn can find any sort of way to shoehorn himself into that fight, which is unlikely considering he's about 2 seconds back of Van Dalen in P8, it looks like we're not going to have a single AM driver punch their ticket into that A main through this first heat race. But right now we've got Adrian Sins, the 2 Adrian Sins, fighting for that final transfer spot. A brotherly battle as it stands at the moment. We'll see what happens there. We're following Archie Heron, who's about to start the final lap of the race in just a few moments time. Meanwhile, Harvey Jones and Lewis Gordon going side by side, heading into, ooh, and that's definitely contact there. I heard the puff, I heard the banging of carbon fiber as they went side by side. going into that final chicane. Just cut a little bit too close. However, they got away with that contact, which is a little bit surprising. I think if we had any sort of side pod damage in real life like you'd have in Formula 1, or even floor damage like you'd have in Formula 1, those two drivers would definitely be feeling that pain. Riding on board with Burgesson, who's at the tail end of this fight, it would not shock me in the slightest if when they come through Lacombe this time by, he could be in that P2 spot, because it's looking like Gordon is closing, and he's going to try and go for a move here on Jones at the nearest opportunity, but Burgesson is closing in as well, and I think he's going to make it 3 wide unless he assists Harvey Jones with a bump. No, he's trying to go for the pass in the grass. 2 wheels off into the dirt there. He has to back at it because he could see that space was running out fairly quickly. Still going side by side are Harvey Jones and Lewis Gordon. Ooh, making contact. A little bit of a bump between those two exiting Lacombe. Meanwhile, the battle with the Adriansons continues, and no, it's contact between Adriansons and Amblard, spinning the both of them around and sending them down the order. Adriansons and Amblard are now out of those transfer spots, and it's allowed the other Adriansons and Van Dalen to be in those final 2 transfer positions. Ooh, Lewis Gordon nearly making contact. I think he actually did make contact with Burgesson coming through. I believe it's it is No Name. Turn number 9 there. That was very close. If they were like a few pixels away from sending one of those cars airborne, but Burgesson now trying to look for the move down the inside. He's fighting for that last podium position here in this race. These drivers have to realize, hey, you're in a great position. You have a massive gap between himself and the drivers fighting for those transfer spots. You don't have to risk it this early on into the night with the final lap of this heat race. However, they're still racing each other quite hard. Burgesson is going to have a fantastic run. He's going to have that slipstream going down this back not so straight straightaway here. Burgesson side by side here with Lewis Gordon as they're about to enter Blanchimont in just a few moments' time. Nearly banging wheels they are. Going into this corner, they're banging wheels for sure. That is incredibly close there. Can't separate a playing card between those two cars for a vast majority of that fight. Burgesson now trying to switch his approach and go down the inside, heading into the chicane, and they definitely made contact there. That's big contact between all 2 of them. That is silly, guys. You're battling so hard. Even though you had a massive gap between himself and the drivers in the final transfer spots, they still managed to get away with it, though, and leads to Theodore Burgesson grabbing that final podium position. Meanwhile, Adriansons and Van Dalen get the final transfer spots of this race at 2 Pro-Ams, punching their ticket in. Meanwhile, Zudwell and Run were the top of the 2 drivers to not make it into the main show here through this heat race. We're going to take a look at a replay of this hard battling between Lewis Gordon and Theodore Burgesson. This is absolutely, I mean, as a commentator, as a broadcaster, I can respect them quite a lot for battling hard, but as a driver, what are you guys doing? You're 1 corner away from the finish. I understand you want to grab that podium, but the podium positions in these heat races don't really pay out the most amount of points. You risked throwing away your spot in that A main just for a podium in the heat race. However, they are racers, so I guess they're going to fight as hard as they possibly can. And speaking of heat races, we've got another one coming up in just a few moments time, and I think we're going to get the starting grid for that one in just a few moments time. I feel bad for my vocal cords. Thankfully, the nice, refreshing water that I have right next to me is going to help me, and it's going to help Wheelman well in the fact that he's starting this race from the pole. Oddstall in P2, that's a fantastic result from him. Poon in P3, Heldorn in P4, that's a great result for the Pro-Am driver. That's going to be Victor Kolmala in P number 5, Jordy Spetskins in P6, Lorenzado, Michelson, Hott, Jay Walsh, and Nick Polliard rounding out your top 11, then Delaguedre, who did not set a time in that qualifying session, rounding out your top 12 and your only 12 starters in this race. I'm not sure if he will actually take the start here. Did not set a time in the qualifying session. Not sure if he bailed out during practice before qualifying here, but still, I think if it's anything like the heat race that we just saw, I think we're in for a tremendous race here, folks. Only a few more cars left to line up on the grid, and then after that happens, the drivers are going to be on their way. You can take it a little bit easy now. I can take a deep breath and relax. This is like a yoga session here right before the start of this race. I'm sure these drivers on the grid are feeling quite nervous as the lights are going to go out and the drivers are going to be on their way into turn number 1. It's a great start there for Vetty Wheelman, and he's going to have the lead of the field heading into turn number 1. Meanwhile, drivers nearly going 3 wide entering that first corner. These drivers, again, do not fear death, whether it's on lap 1 or the final lap of that A main. They will still battle as hard as they can, but it's going to be Vetty Wheelman at the front of the field. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, his teammate Komala is trying to make up some places. I believe this is a fight to try and get into P4 of this race. That's a pretty good start from him to make up one spot. Was very close there to the curb, so I'm wondering if you'll have to serve a slowdown going down this Camel straightaway. He is dropping back a little bit, so I think he may be. Meanwhile, we've got some drivers already going 3 wide, nearly going 3 wide, about to enter Lake Home. This time by is going to be Wheelman and the loser of this fight, unless he can hold his own coming through these corners, which he will not. He backstab it, doesn't well go side by side through a very narrow section of the course so very early on. But right now, it's the Wave Italy racing team currently running 2 and now they're run 2 and 4. Now they're running 2 and 3 as Komala tries to go for a move. Oh no, and he spins around, making contact with the driver that he went side by side with. He definitely lost his rear wing. I saw that F4 car without a rear wing, and yep, there it is. Komala, always a very fast racer, but incredibly aggressive and occasionally asinine at times, if I'm being honest, and sadly going side by side, coming through Ravage at the very start of this race. Has cost him his rear wing and cost him a shot, and there he goes, spinning around yet again. Komala backing it into the barrier, and I think unless he broke his wheel there, he will try and make his way back to the pits, but that is his chance of making it into the A main here through this heat race done for good. So he's definitely going to be on the back foot massively when it comes time for the B main in just a few moments time. Meanwhile, his much more conservative but still equally fast teammate Wellen is trying to find any sort of way he can to get past and retake the lead of the race from Oddstall, who took it from him, going down the Camel straightaway this time by. However, it looks like, ooh, very close to the rear wheel there. I was expecting one of them to go flying there, but thankfully Wellen backs off there a little bit. Will he try and go for a move here heading into the chicane? That is a big lift there. I don't think he is seeing the bigger picture. Unlike his teammate, he sees the bigger picture and he realizes, hey, we are 2 minutes and 20 into this race. We haven't even started the second lap. What's the point of going for really aggressive moves if I can just remain in P2 and have a really good position? This is Jeld Heldorn basically stopped going down the start-finish straightaway. I wonder if he got a maniacal slowdown or picked up some sort of damage. He's towed back to the pits there, as has Komala, who's actually just pulled into the pits after his damage. So Heldorn, that is bizarre there. I believe he is actually still on track there, but regardless, not sure what in the world happened to Jeld Heldorn. He was running in a great position. Speaking of running in a great position, Oddstall was in the lead, now running in P2 as well, and tries to get past him, and does so successfully, going down the Camel straightaway on this lap. So far, only 2 casualties from this race thus far. Komala, who's actually rejoined the race 30 seconds back of these two, so he is hopelessly out of contention. And Heldorn, who I said towed back to the pits, I think he just disappeared from my perspective. However, he is still massively on the back foot. He must have picked up a slowdown, because he was, well, slowing down beforehand. Maybe just picked up, I was seeing this past week in the iRacing community some very weird slowdowns where you'd have like -5 seconds to serve like a 2-minute slowdown or something ridiculous like that. So maybe Heldorn got hit by one of those and just had to serve it practically instantly, but that is still such a shame there for Heldorn, who's running in a great spot. Sadly for him, it doesn't look like it's going to be a good show either, as is for Delaguedre, who's now dropped back. He's actually towed back to the pits. I believe he made contact with Jay Walsh, who's pulled in as well. So those two have towed. Not sure what in the world happened there. I believe they were going through No Name at the time, and oh my god, that is an absolutely wrecked Formula 4 car there for Jay Walsh. We're gonna have to take a look at a replay, because that is, I mean, that's a wheel off, the front wing completely gone, as with the nose cone, and the rear wing missing as well. So I'm not sure what in the world happened here. We're going to take a look at a replay of what actually happened between Delaguedre and Jay Walsh heading into No Name, and I think, ooh, I don't have a good feeling about this, and yet they made oh my god, that is a massive impact. I think real quick here, as we take a look at another replay of this very unfortunate accident with Jay Walsh going into No Name corner. I think that was Delaguedre just miscuing it, and that was a massive impact there for Jay Walsh. Jay Walsh did not survive that impact, so we'll just hold a quick moment of silence for that. That was brutal. That was a terrible impact. However, he will have a chance to redeem himself in that B main coming up after this. We are halfway through this second heat race, and while we haven't seen the hard battling that we saw in that first one, we have seen a lot of attrition. Currently, Michelson is running in that final transfer spot. Meanwhile, Jordy Spetskins is battling here with Lorenzato, currently in P4 and P5. Michelson is in that final transfer spot, has a decent gap between himself and Lewin Hott for that final spot there, about 2 seconds separating the two of them currently. So I think Michelson feeling quite good about his chances right now, and yet again it would be another amless transfer positions here in the second heat race. Currently the top running am is Nick Polliard, who's usually, with all due respect, running at the back of this field, so I don't think he'll be able to claw up and make up about 9 seconds if he wants to find any sort of way to move into that A main race. So it looks like yet again we're going to have a completely amless field making it through into that A main through the heat races here. Michelson running decently right now. He has a pretty decent gap between himself and Hott, as stated before, actually going down a little bit now, so it's a little under 2 seconds currently. However, with not a whole lot of time left to go in this race, I believe we have about 2 or 3 laps to go, if I'm not mistaken, trying to put my math in my head. I believe this is 3 laps to go, so they're taking the 2 to go this time by as Jay Walsh and Delaguedre actually exit the pits, albeit multiple laps down and hopelessly out of contention. Actually, no, they are still on the lead lap. God bless their heart after that very hard contact. Jay Walsh has come back from the dead. He has been reincarnated and is currently running in P11 with his old adversary about 2 seconds right behind him. So we'll see if those two come to blows in the later stages of this race here. Only 10 cars actually has 10 cars left within any sort of dying wish of making it into the race. I mean, really, it's just 9, considering Kumala's issues earlier on in the race, 32 seconds back of his teammate, Vetty Wheelman and currently still holding off any sort of challenge from Oddstall as they take to the 2 to go. This time by, Oddstall has put together a pretty good race. He hasn't been a driver that we've seen running up towards the front of these races, if I'm being honest. I can't really remember the last time we mentioned him on a broadcast. That was a beautiful drift there from Welland exiting that first turn there, but maybe the pressure is getting to him, maybe what could be happening here is he's forcing Oddstall to try and lift off here to have a bad run coming out of the Kemmel straightaway. That'd be a heck of a way to do it. However, they're still pretty close there. I think Oddstall didn't fall for his trick if there was some kind of trickery going on there, as Oddstall is closing. The gap is less than a 10th of a second. They're bump drafting going down that back straightaway, going down the Kemmel straightaway there. Spetskins, meanwhile, gets past Poon to move into that final podium position. Right behind them, you can see him going side by side, heading into Lake Como as well, and still holds off that lead challenge there from Oddstall. Wasn't successful there from the Norwegian driver. Spetskins, the Dutch driver for Alpha Esports, running in a pretty good spot right now, has a nice gap between himself and Poon. However, with how strong the slipstream is, that could close up fairly quickly. Meanwhile, it's a nice battle between Lorenzato and Michelson that could shape up here as they're separated by about 0.4 of a second. Meanwhile, Hott, I think, has actually, he's still closing in slowly but surely from Michelson. Still a pretty big gap there, so with about a lap and a half left to go, I believe Lewin Hott will not be able to make it into the A main race here with this second heat race result. However, he will be putting himself in a decent spot. It's the top 4 positions that move on to the A main from that B main race that we have coming up in just a few moments time. So I think that Lewin Hott, even though it's very unlikely that he makes it in to that A main with this result, unless some drivers crash in front of him, it happened with the drivers battling for the podium, even though it didn't cost transfer spots in that first heat race, it could still very well happen here. We'll just have to wait and see what happens over this next lap and a 5th, I guess we have to say, heading into Blanchimont in just a few moments time here, going through turn 16. Only 4 corners left to go, then they're going to be taking the white flag this time by. Oddstall does not have many more opportunities to grab the lead. However, he may have one now. He actually backs out of it there. That is smart racing there. The two Scandinavian drivers giving each other a lot of respect. These two drivers who aren't teammates are actually giving each other more respect than Kumala has given to his teammate Welland throughout this season. So looks like maybe some shuffling may have to go on at Wave Italy. I'm not going to assume anyone's going to get fired. That is not something kind to say on a broadcast. However, what I think will be kind to say is that Oddstall has a really good shot of grabbing the lead here. He's pulling out of the slipstream maneuvering, trying to save that run. He doesn't want to catch him up too early and try and go for a move heading through the Eau Rouge and Radion section. So he's trying to save up his stuff, pull out the draft. Now he's firmly in the draft and catching up to him quick. He is a man on a mission right now, closing quite a lot. They're now going to go side by side. He's not backing out of it anymore. He is buzzing by and blowing the metaphorical doors off Wellen. He's gotten the lead of the race, and he's able to clear him before they get into the braking zone here. I gotta wonder, will Odstall have a shot of actually, will Wellen have a shot to make it up and back into P1? Meanwhile, Spetskins has gone past, has actually gone overtaken by Poon. So Poon now back into that top podium position, the last podium position, I should say. Meanwhile, Michelson and Lorenzato have gone side by side, and it's actually drawn the gap between Haught and that final transfer spot down to actually less than half a second here. So I think the Brazilian, he may be down, but he is certainly not out of it. There's still some decent overtaking opportunities left to go between now and the checkered flag of the second heat race, and as is with Wellen as well. I think Wellen, at this stage, he may have to consolidate his stuff and just save it up for a run heading into the chicane on the last lap of the race. That'd be a brilliant move at the dying stages of the second heat race here. He's going to have to be very careful going through turns 14 and 15 here, because this is the last real, any sort of challenging corner in these F4 cars, even though it's a little bit challenging. Heading through Blanchimont, they're pretty much flat through there. So now Wellen trying to consolidate anything he can, trying to retake the lead. He is firmly in the draft of Odstall. Going down here, and he's going to try and go for the move. Heading into Blanchimont, he's going to have the inside line there, try and hold it off as best he can. Try not to make contact, these two will, because they're in a great spot to make it into that A-main. They get through there cleanly, which is quite surprising, and it looks like Wellen, unless he overshoots himself, heading into that final corner, it looks like he's going to be taking the win of this race. Meanwhile, Spetskins and Poon have continued to battle, with Poon holding off that fight, but it's wheelman Wellen taking the checkered flag in the second heat race, 0.4 of a second ahead of Odstall there in P2. Chris Poon rounds out the podium in third. That's Spetskins, Michelson, and Lorenzato taking that final transfer position there. Less than a half a second separated himself and Lewin Holt there. So even though Haught finishes in 7th and doesn't advance into the A-main with his result here in the second heat race, you guys still give a lot of props to him, because even though he was down, as I said it many times throughout that race, he certainly didn't count himself out of it. So you gotta give him a lot of respect for that. Komala, the last of the drivers in the top 10, 12 seconds back of Nick Polliard, the top running AM from this race. So once again, a point that I mentioned could be a possibility in that heat race, in that first heat race, and as I mentioned in the second heat race that we just had, no drivers from the AM category punching their ticket into the main show here later on this evening. So Jay Walsh is going to be one of the drivers in that B main we have coming up in just a few brief moments time. I don't have a good feeling about any AM driver making their way into that A-main race, if I'm being brutally honest. We have some very heavy hitters. Delaguedre, who started last. I thought he wasn't even going to take the start after not saying a time in qualifying, although that couldn't. I think maybe it wasn't from a lack of trying. I think he just picked up some slowdowns and picked up some incident points that invalidated any sort of lap time he tried to set in that session. So maybe that's a reason why he did not have a time on the board in qualifying. We're following Jay Walsh as he's going to take the checkered flag. P11, 1 minute and 42 seconds back of Wellen, who took the win in the second heat race. I just spilled water on my desk. We were going so well. I thought this broadcast was going well, and then I spilled a tiny bit of water on my desk. Hopefully that didn't hit my mouse, otherwise we'd be in a real trouble-ridden spot between now and the end of this. So as I clean off the spill on my desk with no towel, we'll run through the starting grid for this B main. It's going to be the AM driver Zootwell starting that race from the pole. Haught in second, Run in third. That's Heldorn in fourth there. So right as I was saying that the AM drivers will be on the back foot, they're making up P1 and P3 on the starting grid. That's Adriansons, Polliard, Lartson, Komala, Amblard, Walsh, Labinson, and Delaguedre rounding at the top 12, rounding at the field, I believe, here in this B main race. This is going to be interesting, as I don't know if there's some sort of weird cloud formation on screen. I'm not sure if you're seeing this as well, Josh, but I'm seeing some weird clouds on screen. Maybe some driver... I think we have a tiny bit of a technical issue here, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, hopefully this is not a massive issue here. Hopefully the broadcast is good. I believe the broadcast is good, so just very strange cloud formations there. That will be something that you drivers have to negotiate at the start, and Benga disappears there, so the drivers are on their way into turn number 1. It's a pretty decent start there for Luan Holt, who's trying to find any way in the book he can to take the lead of this race. He's going to have that inside line, and while there's a little bit of a defense there, Luan Holt is going to be in the great position to take the lead of this race. However, it won't be a hard challenge here. He's going to go side by side, nearly going side by side. Are a lot of these drivers going side by side, entering Eau Rouge this time by nearly going 3 wide on the exit. Who is this trying to find any trick in the book to go around them? I believe this is Adriansons, if I'm not mistaken, that we're riding on board with. Yeah, Jensen Adriansons, who was trying to find any way to go 3 wide, exiting Radion. Oh, thank you, Dad, for a towel and a new glass of water. That's always nice. Thank you, Dad. I appreciate it. But meanwhile, Adriansons, we're riding on board with him. Right as I was saying that he was feeling racy, he's dropped back like a rock. He was nearly going to drop down to P6. I believe he will drop down to P6. This is a disaster start from the pro driver. He has a decent amount of field ahead of him, but he will have that inside line, which is going to play a role for him. Kumala, with a pretty decent start, was trying to find any way to get past Adriansons there. Thankfully, for his sake, he managed to go through the turn number 8 of Rivage without crashing like he did at the start of that second heat race. We're following Luan Holt right now, currently running at the front, and while it looked like he was going to lose out on the lead there, as it was, I believe that was Heldorn getting very, actually no, I believe that was Zootwell getting very close to the back end of Holt. He actually managed to hold off to that position, so pretty good start there from him. Zootwell is going to be in a very hard position right now. Adriansons, even though he didn't have the best of starts in the world after he was trying to find a way to sneak his way onto the podium positions, exiting Eau Rouge, he is still within touching distance of these drivers right in front of him, so I think he is definitely not out of it here in this race. I wonder, will an AM driver still be in those transfer spots between now and the checkered flag coming out in about 12 minutes time, a little bit longer here from these B main races. However, they are still just as exciting as the heats and the A main we have coming up later on this evening. We've got drivers going side by side in the top 5, clawing for any position they can and trying to avoid those killer curbs on the inside, and it's another driver getting called out by the killer curbs. Who was that going for a spin? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, taking a look at my live timing screen, to a driver that's dropped back like a rock. That was Tim Runn that spun on that curb. I believe that was a curb on the inside of turn 19. We have contact between 2 drivers. What on earth was that about? Right as I was switching away from my live timing screen, I see, was that a brake check there between Zootwell and Run? We have a little bit of a Dutch civil war between these 2 drivers. That is not ideal between the 2 of them. I think Zootwell must have some sort of damage from that. That is such a shame for a driver that was running a fantastic position, now in P11. We'll take a look at a replay to see what in the world was going on here. We're following Run now, as he was the one getting past the stricken car. Was it a slowdown possibly? He just pulled over to the side. So was it a slowdown there that he had to serve, that Zootwell had to serve, and that just allowed Tim Run to go past? That is very strange. I think actually Zootwell is still dropping back a little bit. Heldorn has taken the lead of the race. Hot is actually dropping back like a rock, trying to find a way to get past Lortzen, but in doing that, he may fall at risk of losing that P3 spot to Adriansons. That's a nice battle between those 2. That's starting to form Kumala. A lot of these Kumala's dropping back like a rock. Did he have some sort of incident? He did. He's towed back to the pits. So yet again, the Wave Italy driver having some sort of crash in the early stages. He joins Zootwell, who is towed back to the pits after that very bizarre issue that he had. So we now have only 10 drivers left in this race. We're taking a look at the replay, the pass that Heldorn pulled off to get by Luan Holt and drop him back into a much challenging position. Luan Holt is now in the hot seat after this move was put on by Heldorn, who just had a fantastic run on that outside and held it off. I believe he clears them before they get to the braking zone. Yes, he did. So that's Heldorn putting on a fairly commanding move there on Luan Holt, who's just a sitting duck in that lead. Being in the lead of most tracks is a good thing, but here at Spa, where the slipstream is so important, that is just basically the worst position you could be in, even when you take the white flag. So I'm sure Heldorn, between now and the next 30 seconds, Heldorn may drop down to P4. Who knows what in the world happened? I think, speaking of what in the world happened, we may have to take a look to see what in the world happened to Kolmala. And this is actually, yeah, this is heading into turn number 1 last time by. So was this is going off track here. This was the first one that he had. I think he just ran wide feeling a little bit of pressure there, maybe picked up a slowdown. Possibly he was near that fight, and you can see him a little bit slow. Maybe he had to slow down there. Maybe he did not. I believe it looked like he was dropping back a little bit. Maybe just didn't have the best run in the world. But this was what caused him to retire from this race, is going side by side. And yet again, it's going through turn 8. He makes contact. I believe that was Ambler that he made contact with. And I believe that may be 2 races in a row. I believe those were the 2 that made contact in that second heat race. And they made contact here in the B main. And sadly, it's going to end in tears for them. This may end in tears. It's Larson, Halt, and Heldorn, the 3 Pro-Am drivers, running 1, 2, and 3 right now, going 3 wide, heading into turn number 5 here, Lake Calm. It would be very funny if they were heading into turn number 3. It'd be about 14 threes in the span of a couple seconds. Adrianson's moving into P3 after Heldorn had a terrible run. Just as I said not very long ago, that with how powerful the slipstream is, Heldorn could drop back like a rock and be in P4 in about 30 seconds. Look what happened. He's in P4 now, behind Adrianson's, and he's in that last transfer spot. However, he is feeling quite comfortable. The gap between himself and Amblard is pretty big, as we're seeing Adrianson's try and make a 3 wide heading into Puan. I don't think so, Chief. That is not an opportunistic overtake. However, it led to him losing out on that final podium position by Heldorn, who's now challenging Luan Hot, heading into P12, heading into the Fanier section. Heldorn is going to be on that outside, and he's actually backs out of it before he has that inside line into the next section of that small little switchback here. He's still trying to find a way to get past here. All 3 of these drivers, they're still going to battle hard, don't get me wrong. However, I think maybe they should think, hey, we're running in a decent position. We're running in the top 4. And in these B mains, that's what matters the most. Finishing P4, finishing in that top 4, and being well clear of Amblard in P5, who must have some sort of damage after that contact with Komala, because he's not making any sort of ground here. And that was, oh my god, that was very close to contact with Heldorn and Hot coming through, about to enter Blanchimont there. That could have ended in absolute heartbreak and more wrecked race cars there if they made contact, but they got away with it. They may not get away with this here, and they don't. They made contact coming through the chicane, and that's a rear wing gone from Heldorn. He was blinking out a little bit there, so maybe connection issues could be the reason why those 2 came to blows. As they both rejoined the track, they were both merged inside of each other. It looked like a complete violation of natural law. We're riding on board with Luan Hot actually following him now, heading into the chicane, and this is just 2 drivers fighting side by side coming through a section, which is tricky for drivers going single file. So I can imagine maybe the connection issues could be the reason why Luan Hot and him made contact. I mean, they are from fairly different parts of the world, if we're being honest. Luan Hot, one of the only drivers in this series from Brazil, so I think that might have been the reason why they came to blows. Labinson is now down in the pits. He is in P9 and pretty much out of it. So right now, Amblard, with all that chaos, has fallen into a transfer spot. No drivers in the AM category are currently in a transfer position. However, we may be close. Actually, I say that the gap between Amblard and Hot is only about a second, but the gap between Amblard and Walsh is about 3/10. So right as I was saying, as we see the damage and stricken car of Heldorn is now fallen out of the transfer spots without a rear wing, we could see Jay Walsh be the only AM driver to punch his ticket into that A main. That would be a very impressive result for the Brit if he can find any sort of way to challenge Amblard, or maybe if Hot has some kind of damage on that car. The gap between himself and Amblard is actually now under a second. It's now about 8/10. So we'll see if that gap goes down between now and the checkered flag. About 9 minutes in, so a little over 5 minutes left to go here. Only 8 cars currently on track, really 5, you could say, are within a good shot of battling for any sort of meaningful position. Jay Walsh is about 5 seconds back at this man. Ask Larson in the number 210 car. He has led this race for not very long. However, he has a pretty comfortable lead, currently 7/10 of a second between himself and Adrianson's. However, that could drop down like a rock in a few straightaways time. We're following Jay Walsh, who's actually not sitting in the slipstream of the 2 cars right in front of him. Hot and Amblard going side by side, heading into Blanchimont here. Are any of the drivers going to back out? No, they do not. They're still going side by side as they're about to enter the braking zone of the chicane here, and it's going to be still evenly matched between the 2 of them. Hot is going to have that inside line line in the second part is Amblard. Gotta find any sort of way to pull off the switchback. He does not, so they still stay line astern right now. Hot, I am not very confident in. He's a pretty decent driver. He tends to find himself in some good positions. However, at this stage of the race, I think Amblard and Jay Walsh. Amblard is definitely a very fast driver, a pro driver for a reason, and I think Jay Walsh is just a man on a mission. So I think Jay Walsh may have the spirit to actually beat Luan Hot and move into that transfer spot. We'll just have to wait and see what happens between now and the finish of this race. About 3 laps ago, we're following Amblard, who's actually given a little bit of a bump there to Luan Hot, who just had a big save trying to keep that thing on the road. I'm sure Hot will not be happy about his fellow driver there giving him a bump coming through Eau Rouge and Radion. Meanwhile, they're still going side by side, entering the Lacombe chicane. It's going to be Hot on the inside, and he's going to hold off that challenge there from Amblard. I wonder, is there any sort of front wing damage? I'm trying to look very closely to see if there is on Amblard. That was significant contact, and that was front wing to wheel there. I'm looking very closely. I believe there may be a little bit of scuffed paint and nothing more there on the front of Amblard's car, which is quite impressive. Yeah, you can see there as we're riding on board with the rear of Luan Hot. A little bit of paint scraping there. I don't think his front wing itself was actually tweaked in that. However, if it was just slightly tweaked, even if it's a millimeter off, these cars are built to the nearest millimeter. Their race cars are built as precisionally as they can. I don't believe precisionally is a word. However, it is for this case. Actually, I think there is a little bit of scuffing on that front wing, so I think it may be a little bit off kilter. So we'll see if Amblard is just a sitting duck on these back straightaways. Has a big snap between turns 13 and 14 there, and I wonder, will Jay Walsh find any sort of opportunity and see this as a great shot to stake a claim? This would be a fantastic result, because right now there are no AM drivers in that A main race, and right now Jay Walsh is the only one that has some sort of shot. Polyard and Run, currently running P6 and P7, are well farther back, about 6 seconds back of these three. So Jay Walsh needs to find any sort of opportunity, and even if he goes for a jackbutt move, shall we say, I think he really has to risk it, because hey, it's a good position that he has. Right now he'd still be the highest positioning AM driver if I'm not mistaken. However, we're seeing Amblard and Hot go side by side heading into the chicane, and they make contact again. It's Hot making contact with another driver coming through the second part of that chicane. They make contact again. I think that may have been a little bit intentional as they're on the white flag lap. So right now, I don't have a good feeling about either of these cars. Does Amblard have damage? He does have damage from contact earlier. He definitely has damage now, and that's going to lead to Jay Walsh to get by the both of them there. Right as I was saying, I wonder if those two have damage. They come to blows again. That is such a shame. That was so avoidable too. Both of those drivers, I can imagine there was some sort of damage on both of those F4 cars. However, what it's led to, right as I was saying, that Jay Walsh may be the only AM driver to make their way into this B main race, as we're seeing Adriansons and Larson go side by side heading into Lacombe. Right as I was saying that Jay Walsh may be the only one to grab the AM, well, be the only AM driver to make their way into that A main. He moves up to P3, and Run is now in P4, so we're gonna have two AMs make their way into the A main race, as Adriansons got the move done on Larson, who put together a fantastic drive, still putting together a fantastic drive. The checkered flag has not come out just yet. We still have about half a lap to go before they do. However, I gotta applaud Larson. The fact that he's put together as good of a race as he has, currently running P2, and he was holding off a challenge from a pro driver for so long. That was incredibly impressive. This was not here. This is Luan Hot, and we'll see. I'm not sure if there's some sort of brake checking going on there, or Amblard just seeing the red mist. I think either way, for both of those drivers, it's unfortunate. There may be some very heated discussions between those two in the iRacing chat after that, because they're not very happy with that series of corners. 2 corners in a row that they come to blows, and 2 incidents that take them out of any sort of contention. Their evenings are done. But right now, this battle isn't done. Larson, it looked like he was going to try and go side by side. He is trying to go side by side, looking for a move around the outside, which cannot formulate around the outside of Blanchimont. He's still going to try and find a way to get past, heading into the chicane. It's been 3 for 3 so far in this race, with drivers come to blows into the chicane. We'll see if it becomes 4 for 4. Ooh, that was very wide there for Adriansons, as my voice is giving out, but it's going to be Adrianson's taking the checkered flag in this B main race. A fairly dramatic one there, even though a lot of the drama happened farther in the back. Jay Walsh is going to grab a fantastic P3, grabbing the podium in this B main race, punching his ticket into that A main. That is a brilliant drive there for the Brit, for the AM driver, and he's going to have another AM joining him by the name of Tim Runn, who had a very strange race, had contact earlier on, spun coming through that chicane not very long ago. However, with how chaotic that race was, he still ended up on in the transfer spots and just outside the podium. So it just shows you how dramatic this evening of racing has been thus far. We've had 3 races already. I'm sure this A main that we have coming up here in just a few moments time is going to be quite impressive. We're just waiting for a few more. Actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are still waiting for some drivers to actually take the checkered flag here in this A main. Actually, not the A main. We have the A main coming up, the B main race. My doing this broadcast for so long has completely fried the like 7 brain cells that I had since birth. So yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say other than that. I believe I'll take a look at my live timing screen. We have all the other drivers that have actually taken the checkered flag of this race, so I think what I may do here is I may take a small little break because I've been running my mouth constantly. I mean, I'm paid to run my mouth, but I think talking for the past, what is it now, about an hour. We've been streaming here on Apex since about, well, for me it's about 2:55 here on the East Coast, so I'm not sure how that converts into other time zones. Me working at Apex for about a year now, I should know all the time zones. However, I do not, so I think I'm going to take a small little break here, have a small little chat with my producer Josh. I call you our producer, even though I'm the only one. Actually, you can count the empty seat next to me that's currently being occupied by a tumbleweed. So I think we'll call you our producer for this, acknowledging the sentience of the tumbleweed right next to me. I think we'll take a quick little break here, have some B-main footage, B-roll footage of Spa running in the background, and you'll hear from me again once I finish this glass of water, which I still have barely gotten a chance to tap into. It's alright, man, don't worry. I'm a fucking shambles here, so it's okay. Oh boy. Yeah, we got a little bit of time. Oh, you can see some drivers going off here in this warm-up session. I very much valued that break. I had to take a look to see who grabbed the pole for the IndyCar race. These drivers are battling in the warm-up session. This is this is awesome here as we're seeing these drivers weave all around the track. That is a very, I think that was Theodore Burgesson that looked like he was driving on ice coming through the small little straight between No Name and Puan. They're still going side by side, heading into 12, and they're making contact. And well, they're in the warm-up session, so they can afford to junk their race cars. Well, they have about a minute left to go here in this warm-up session. I realized that throughout like most of that I wasn't actually talking into the microphone as I was trying to evaluate the small little spill I had of water during the heat races that we just had a few moments ago. So things are set now. We want to switch our attention now to the A main race that we have coming up, and what a race it is. I can imagine we're gonna see a lot. I mean, we've seen drivers come to blows. We've seen many drivers actually making contact, which is a little bit shocking here at this track, where I was somewhat expecting the field to be pretty close. I'm shocked we haven't seen many incidents coming into Lake Como. I think besides the lap 1 Shamazel in that first heat race at this point about an hour ago, we haven't seen anything of the sorts, as we're getting some practice starts now in the later stages of this warm-up session. These drivers want to maximize their launch that they're gonna have in a few moments time. Once this warm-up session ends, the drivers line up on the grid, and when the drivers get on their way after the 5 lights, head out. One thing I was always worried about with commentating is trying to avoid the phrase, it's lights out and away we go. So I think in my year commentating here at Apex, I think I've somewhat avoided that well. So yippee-ki-yay to me. I'll want to throw some sort of celebration. I don't have cake with me or any sort of candles I can't blow out saying, hey, look, I didn't use some other terminology that a lot of other commentators use. But the warm-up session has ended. It's cut my jibber-jabber here. A main is going to be pretty intense, so hopefully you watching the stream here on Apex Racing TV are ready for this action. And it's going to be Archie Heron at the front of the starting grid, Wheelman Wellen in P2, and that's going to be Harvey Jones in 3rd, Oddstall in 4th, Burgesson in 5th, and it's going to be Calix Poon there in P number 6, Lewis Gordon in 7th, Jordy Spetskins in P number 8, Adriansons in 9th, and that's Michelson running at your top 10. That's going to be Van Dalen, Lawrence Zotto, and we'll go through the rest of the grid. That rounds out your top 12. It's a top 8 of pro drivers, so that's a pretty stacked field there. That's going to be an intense fight. It's going to be Adriansons, Larson, Jay Walsh, and Tim Runn running at your 16 car field. All 3 of those drivers made it in and punched their tickets into this A main race through that B main that we just had, which was very chaotic and nearly blew out my vocal cords. Thankfully, I got a chance to enjoy a bit more of this water here, and we have 1 car missing. Not sure who that is, but regardless, the drivers are now on their way into turn number 1. It's a pretty decent start there from your pole sitter. Even keel start, all things considered, but Vetty Wheelman Wellen is going to have that slipstream. He's going to have that run on Archie Heron when they go down the Camel straightaway in just a few moments time. Some drivers already going side by side, some nearly going 3 wide when they went into La Source this time by. So far so clean, but that can definitely change. We still have a long way to go before we even finish this first lap. The trains are a foreman, and we already have some drivers bump drafting already in this race. Right now we're running on board with a driver in the top 10, as you can see, side by side now all throughout this field, side by side at the front, nearly 3 wide. It's now 3 wide at the front, threading the needle here. That's going to be very close. Heron has to back out of it, rightfully so. 3 wide right behind them. I think that was Burgesson in the middle. I think, oh, though, they did not come through there clean. I see some puffs of smoke in the back. A driver backed into the barrier. I'm not sure who that was. I think Larson might have been involved in that, if I'm not mistaken. Poon, according to our producer Josh, was involved in that as well. So we'll switch our attention to that in just a few moments time. We'll take a look at the replay now to see whatever happened here. I think it all started when these drivers went 3 wide here. That's not a section of the course where you want to see drivers going 3 wide, and that's exactly what I was expecting to happen. Burgesson gets a big bump there. I think he managed to get away with it somewhat smoothly. However, one driver that did not get away from that at all was Calix Poon, who has a very unfortunate start to this race, currently running in P15, as did Lewis Gordon, who's now running in P16. So those two dropping back like a rock as a result of that incident. It's such a shame to have a crash so early on into this 18-minute race that we have here for this A main. But one driver that has not had a bad start in the slightest is Vetty Wheelman Wellen, who leads the field going down the back, not so straightaway for the first time by, about to enter Blanchimont in just a few moments time. This is like the longest stretch without a corner on this entire lap, even though you're basically turning the whole time. It's only between turns 15, 16, and 17 there, and turn 16 doesn't even have a name, so I'm just saying they're approaching Blanchimont. Maybe that should be the name of that corner, nearly Blanchimont there. But right now we're seeing drivers nearly go 3 wide, definitely going side by side. This low end Hall. Actually, no, that's Jay Walsh. My apologies. I gotta use. They have very similar looking race cars, but that's Jay Walsh putting together a great drive right now. One of the only AMs to make it into this A main, currently running in P12, which is a fantastic result. Meanwhile, Wellen, the gap between himself and Harvey Jones has cratered. They're about 0.2 of a second separating those two. I'm sure they'll be going side by side when they go down the Kemmel straightaway. This time by, tactics are going to be so important in this race. That's going to be vital, especially when it comes time for that last lap. You do not want to lead when you start the last lap of this race because you're just going to get swallowed up going down the Kemmel straightaway on that last lap. But this time by, it looks like Harvey Jones and Oddstall are trying to form some kind of weird pincer movement against Vetty Wellen as they go into Lake Holm. Wellen actually holds off the challenge. That's quite impressive from the Finn that he managed to hold off 2 cars at once. Meanwhile, Heron in P4 trying to size up a move on Oddstall here. Ooh, very aggressive defending from Wellen on Heron as they go into, actually no, that's Harvey Jones, my apologies, as they go into turn number 8, going through Ravage, about to enter no name now, and it's going to be Harvey Jones on the outside, still trying to force any sort of move that he can. Meanwhile, Oddstall looking to make it 3 wide here before they go into Pouon. This time by, Wellen is still at the front of that. Meanwhile, Harvey Jones is now trying to fight very hard to hold off any sort of challenge from Oddstall. I believe he actually put all 4 wheels off the track there, so very close to picking up a slowdown there, but he has dropped back, currently running now in P4 behind Heron, who is now in that final podium position, and Spetskins, who is the last of these cars in this 5-car train. Larson in 6th is about 3 seconds back of your leader Wellen, and he is he's at the front of a massive train himself. Between himself and Run there in P13, it's about 3 seconds separating. What was that, 7 cars? That is absolutely absurd. That's going to be a really good fight, but right now there's a good fight between Oddstall and Wellen. Wellen may lose out on that position. Oddstall has a great run. He's going to be able to clear him just barely going into Blanchimont this time by. Will these drivers try and go side by side? They're nearly going 3 wide before they went into that final chicane. This is really, really tense stuff here as Oddstall loses out on that spot again to Wellen. Wellen retakes the lead here, so Wellen, a man on a mission. I call him Wheelman for a reason, because he is one hell of a wheelman. That is something that we've made obvious and quite clear all throughout this season, and he still continues to hold off the lead of this race when we're about 5 minutes in. Meanwhile, Burgess, after being involved in that small little tussle, he may have a little bit of damage. Some driver that may have a little bit of damage, definitely to his ego, is, I believe that's Van Dalen. Actually, no, that's Tim Run that went for a spin coming through that first corner. So actually, no, that is Van Dalen. My apologies. He goes for a small little tussle, small little spin coming through La Source. I'm not sure if he was assisted in that spin. We'll take a look at a replay, see if it was all by his own accord or he had a little bit of help. Coming into turn 1, he's going to be on the inside here of Larson. Going into 1, and I think he just overcooked it a little bit. Yeah, it's an easy corner to make a mistake on because you have a small little bit of a divot on the inside of that corner. It has a little bit of camber to it. It's probably about like a half a degree or something like that. However, it still makes it feel like that inside front tire falls away from you as you go into that turn. Oddstall has taken the lead of the race from Wellen. It's about 0.3 of a second separating those two, and another 0.3 between Wellen and Heron right now. Harvey Jones is still in the midst of that fight, as is Spetskins. All 3 of these drivers, actually all 5 of these drivers I should say, the 3 running in the podium are probably the drivers that we will see in those podium positions by the time we reach the checkered flag. However, it's not going to be an easy fight. I just say that because they are some of the fastest in this race meeting thus far. We'll see if Harvey Jones tries to find any way to get past him. This is Oddstall now leading this race, the number 115 car for OCM Racing, pulling a little bit of a gap between himself and Wellen, but we'll see. Will Wellen try and go for a move going into the chicane? That is really important. You got maximize your exit coming out of 15. Really, it's 14 that he got maximize your exit on, and try not to goof up coming through 15, and then you'll be flat out on the gas. I can't, balls to the wall, I guess that is appropriate to say here on Apex. Balls to the wall between now and the braking zone for that chicane, and Wellen is closing. A little bit of a bump draft between those two. It's very similar to the not so teamwork that we saw from these two in that first heat race very early on this evening. We saw them bump drafting earlier on. We're continuing to see it here in this race. Again, I think I said it earlier on in this broadcast, and I'll say it again as well. The 2 drivers who are not teammates are actually working better faster than the Wave Italy Racing Team teammates have so far this season. That's honestly quite impressive. Wellen, though, wants to grab the win. He wants to grab his second win of the season. There would be more that he had in that W column if he didn't come to blows with his teammate earlier on in the season. This is Adrianson's trying to look up for a move here on Larson, currently running P7 towards the front of that train, which is actually broken into a 5-2 affair right now. I believe it's Michelson and Walsh. The gap between those two is over a second. Meanwhile, Adrianson's and Lorenzato and all these drivers going side by side. We're running on board with Lorenzato, who's our camera car of this fight. These drivers going 3 wide down the Camel straightaway. Adrianson's, Larson, and Burgesson. We'll see who prevails in this fight. I believe it will be Burgesson, who, after going 3 wide through this corner and setting himself on the back foot, gets through and pulls off a fairly textbook move there. Meanwhile, Lorenzato looking to try and get past here to disperse Adrianson's down to P9. Larson again putting off fantastic drive as he did in that B main race, currently running in P number 7, and that's a very impressive result for the the Pro-Am driver. One of only 2 Pro-Ams currently in that top 10. Michelson is the other. Run is at the front of the AMs currently, right ahead of Jay Walsh, and those two are only separated by about 0.4 of a second. So that's going to be a really good fight between those two, between now and the checkered flag. I think they are really in a fight of their own, so I don't think they have too much slipstream help, as the gap between Michelson and Run is about a second currently, so that's going to be a nice fight between those two. 15 cars currently still on track after Lewis Gordon did not take the start. He was a car missing from our grid at the very start of this A final here, and we're seeing Wellen still leading this race, still taking command, but it may not be for long. Oddstall in that slipstream. He is closing. We can't use the Jaws theme here on Apex Racing TV because of copyright issues. However, you can just imagine the Jaws theme heading into this chicane. We'll see Oddstall, a little bit of bump drifting, I think, again between those two. Again, working better as teammates, even though they aren't actually really teammates. So Wellen appreciating that bump, I'm sure, but I think Oddstall at this stage is saving his tires and saving himself really for any sort of last lap challenge and later race assault here on Wellen to take the win. That'd be his first win of the season if he does. Meanwhile, Larson is going side by side here with Lorenzato, going down the start finish straightaway, entering corner number 1, and it's going to be Larson holding off on that P8 spot for now. We'll see if those two start to have a heads-up fight. Right now, Michelson is probably rooting for Lorenzato to try and challenge him. They're going to go side by side heading into Eau Rouge. I don't have a good feeling about this. Some of these drivers may be closing their eyes as they're going side by side, going through Eau Rouge and Radion. They go single file midway through the corner, but Lorenzato is going to have that drift. Michelson, meanwhile, is closing up to the both of them. We may see the drivers go 3 wide. Michelson's the first to pull out, then Lorenzato. They're going 3 wide, heading into the Camel straightaway. Actually backs Avid, Michelson does, so I think he's seeing his chances of winning in the Pro-Am category. He is going for the points rather than all-out glory, which you gotta respect after he had the A main race last time out at the Nürburgring. He was on his lid in the early stages of that, so I don't think he wants a repeat of that kind of race meeting here at Spa. It's Wellen still leading this race, about a 0.2 of a second gap between himself and Oddstall in P number 2, and Heron actually dropping back a little bit, so I think Oddstall and Wellen may be working together as teammates, well, pseudo teammates, shall we call it, to try and extend a little bit of a gap and break into their own sort of peloton to avoid any sort of influence or challenge or any sort of fight with Heron, Jones, and Spetskins. So that's going to be a nice fight for that final podium spot, as Oddstall and Wellen are still very close right now. It's still a 5-car pack. You can still call it a 5-car pack. However, the biggest gap among all of these is the gap between Oddstall and Heron, about 0.3 of a second, separating them as they go onto this back not so straight straightaway here. Spetskins at the tail end of this field. He's put together a pretty good race right now, the Dutch driver, running quite well. And taking a look at my live timing screen, we've had some drivers absolutely cut through the field like a hot knife through butter, and it's been a mixed bag for a lot of these drivers. Is still very close here. Now Heron, it looked like he was going to try and go for a move on Oddstall, right as Oddstall tried to go for a move on Wellen there. But going through my live time screen, Adrianson's, Larson currently running in P7 and P8 are up 6 positions from where they started, so quite impressive for them. This is one of the other Adriansons who just had an off coming through. This is going through Fania. He turned 13, about to enter 14 here. And, was there some sort of, did he just quit there, or was there some sort of technical issue perhaps there? We have seen it in the past so far this season. Drivers just going flat, just plain off the track. So maybe that could be something that happened there for Adrian, since he's our first retirement of this race. A little bit shocking with how much is up for grabs that the first retirement of this race comes about 12 minutes in. That's a little bit tamer than I was expecting this race to be. However, with 5 cars separated by 0.7 of a second at the front of this field, I'm sure we'll see at least some of these drivers come to blows. Now it's Oddsall trying to go for the move around the outside and does it successfully, heading into Lake Colm. So Wellen drops down to P2. Meanwhile, Jetson Adrianson's, not his ill-fated brother, is currently running in P7 in a small little bit of a sandwich between himself and Burgess and Larson. There's a nice fight between those three. They've broken up that fight just a tiny bit. Larson is currently running at the top of the Pro-Am drivers and has a decent gap between himself and Alexander Michelson, so that's looking very well for him to take the checkered flag as a top Pro-Am driver between now and the end of this race, which is coming in about 5 minutes time. Meanwhile, Tim Runn and Jay Walsh are still pretty close, about 3/10 of a second, I should say, separating those two right now. That's going to be a heads-up fight between those two, I can imagine. I mean, they're very happy the fact they're the only 2 AM drivers that punched their ticket and made it to the A main. However, they still want to go for that AM category win. They want to be the highest finishing AM from this Spa round. I think regardless, though, it's a fantastic result for Jay Walsh. He, as I said at the start of this broadcast, he's an underdog in this series, running as a privateer in the number 316 car, and he may try and find any way to beat Run. And right now, right in front of them is Lorenzato, who must have picked up some sort of damage. It was not very long ago when he was challenging farther up the road. However, since then, he's dropped back like a rock, the last car in the top 10, and acting as a pick. I'm sure Tim Run is not very happy with his adversary, not happy with the Frenchman of Lorenzato, that he's acting as a little bit of a rolling roadblock, but still, he's still trying to find a way to get past him, going side by side. Heading into the chicane, can't get the job done. Run, I think, is really frustrated with the driver right in front of him. However, they aren't lapped cars, so it is perfectly legal. Really, if anything, it would usually be the AM drivers yielding for the pro drivers, so it's a little bit of a role reversal here in this race. I believe Adriansons and Larson went side by side, heading, actually they're still going side by side, exiting Le Source, so we'll see them, actually they single filed out, heading out of the corner and heading into the Eau Rouge and Radion section here. We'll see them try and go side by side, heading into the Camel straightaway. He has a massive run here, trying to find any sort of way to shuffle. Meanwhile, Wellen and Odstall now continuing to fight. I think they're seeing the checkered flag come, and these drivers are feeling quite racy. That's a 3-car train of bump drafting Formula 4s. That is quite impressive that they managed to go through that without a car flying off the road and a ball of fire. However, Heron at this point is feeling quite racy on Odstall, trying to find a way to get past the driver who at one point is leading this race and may be shot down to the final podium position. If not worse, they're very close to making contact. That was definitely contact between the two of them, and with how close their wheels were, that could have ended in tears for the both of them. I'm sure Harvey Jones was seeing those two very close to each other as they went through Rivage, and I'm sure he was thinking on slamming on the brakes and cranking that wheel as much as he could to the right to avoid those two spearing off the circuit. But Odstall and Heron, racing each other quite hard, has allowed Wellen to pull a 5-second gap, not 5 second, a 5/10 of a second gap between himself and Odstall right now. It's looking pretty good for the Finnish driver, with about, I believe we will be taking 2 to go this time by. So it's looking pretty good for the Finn, for Wave Italy Racing, to take his second win in a row. We'll just have to wait and see. Again, anything can happen between now and the checkered flag, but it's looking quite good. Recharging on some water here. Hopefully I don't choke on that. That'd be very embarrassing on a broadcast. Something I've never done on a broadcast. I've wrapped my tongue around itself about 17 times before. I've probably done that on this broadcast already. However, I've never choked on a broadcast, and hopefully tonight is not that night. We're seeing the Adriansons fight with themselves, Burgess and Larson. They're still very close, pulling into their own peloton. 3 cars separated by barely any air. I think all 3 of them were bump drafting each other. Meanwhile, Tim Runn still trying to find a way and failing to find a way to get past Lorenzato. Tried to go for the same move that he did last time by, tried the move around the outside going into that chicane, and we are are on the white flag this time by. So we'll see what happens in all of these fights, whether it be between Larson and Michelson, whether it be between Run or Walsh, or whether it be for the battle for the lead between Wellen and Oddstall. About 0.3 of a second separated them. Oddstall didn't do what he had to do in that second heat race and pull out to try and save a run. He is flat out, balls to the wall. We're going to see these two go side by side. He pulls out to try and go for the move. Meanwhile, Heron and Jones are looking to pick up the pieces. If these two come to blows, Heron is trying to find a way to get by the both of them there. He's looking for that second position from Wellen, who drops down to P3 after a disastrous run through Lake Home for him, which has given the lead to Oddstall in the number 115 car. Meanwhile, Harvey Jones looking to try and put another nail in the coffin for Wellen to move him out of the podium positions. That would be absolutely disastrous for the driver from Finland, who's dominated this race meeting thus far for Wave Italy Racing. But we'll see, will Harvey Jones try and find any sort of way to get past Oddstall? Is going to appreciate if Heron and Wellen go side by side, because that's going to give him a pretty comfortable cushion, which he has right now, about a half a second separating himself and Heron as he go into turn 12 this time by. None of these drivers going side by side. Oddstall would really love to see a Heron and Wellen fight, which I think he will. They're still pretty close, actually dropping back a little bit, so Heron acting like a little bit of a rolling roadblock as that gap build massively is now about 6 and nearly 0.7 of a second as Wellen goes for a balls to the wall, ballsy move, and no, it ends in tears as they exit turn number 15. That's Wellen, your driver who won last time out at the Nürburgring, going into the air. Bummer indeed, my producer Josh says, as he drops down like a rock through the running order, and that all but assures a victory for Oddstall's. Heron and Jones now go side by side trying to battle for P2, but it's going to be in a dramatic series of events. Oddstall rounding the final two corners of this lap, going through turn 19, the final part of that chicane. It's going to be Christian Oddstall taking the checkered flag here at Spa to win the A-Main race for the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship. Heron finishes in second, Jones finishes in P3. We've got a photo finish here right across the line between Larson and Adriansons. Those two are separated by about, I think that's 0.06 of a second separating those two when they cross that finish line after about 18 minutes of racing action. Vetty Wellen, oh, you gotta feel so bad for the guy. Battling hard. He went for an aggressive move. That should be noted. He went for a very aggressive move heading into 15, which I think we'll take a look at a replay of. I believe this is actually, no, this is the photo finish between Larson. Actually, no, this is Van Dalen getting a move done here heading into the chicane. I apologize for that. This is battling with Poon, and sadly it comes to tears going through that chicane. But that was a lot going on there. I think we're going to have to catch up on some of the replays. This was battling here with Jay Walsh here and Tim Run going side by side in the final series of corners, and oh, it came to blows between the two of them. Thankfully, we didn't see an F4 car pitched up onto their side. However, that was definitely some hard contact. Did he have to serve a slowdown there? Was it? Okay, I think they already took the checkered flag. By the time he stopped, I think he was just voicing his displeasure to one of his competitors. Wow. That was a unbelievable meeting here at Spa. It's been an absolute fever dream, definitely not considering the fact that I've been talking for the past hour and a half. I think the racing really spoke for itself there, if I'm being honest. That was hard fighting from start to finish. Man, there's just so much to unpack after that finish. Wellen going for a really aggressive move. I'm curious, Josh, is it okay if we can find a way to get a replay of that? Because I saw that in the corner of my eye. My microphone blocked it just a tiny bit. It was, I believe it was Wellen going off and his small little contact there. I'm not sure who. I believe it was Heron that he made contact with. Going through turn 15 at the later end of that race. I was looking at that, and maybe it was the fact that my mic kind of blocked my view, or the fact that I just wasn't really registering what I was seeing because it was so absurd. I saw Wellen basically like 15 degrees canted downward, like basically on two wheels, had two wheels completely high up on that curb, which is one that is rarely ever touched even in sports car racing, where the drivers eat the curbs here at Spa for breakfast. That was a really, I gotta say, an exciting finish, and we're thinking this may be the replay here of Wellen, and yeah, this is it. Made contact before they went into the corner, went up on two wheels, and yeah, oh, yep, there he goes, one wheel exiting that corner. That's a shame there for Wellen, because, I mean, you can tell he was quite frustrated seeing his chance at finishing this race. on the top step of the podium. He could see his chances of that going away, and contact there, entering the corner, had to take a shallow approach, and I can't really say that any of those two drivers are at fault per se. You could say that Heron may be a little bit at fault for kind of pushing, making that mistake, actually dipped a wheel into the gravel, exiting turn number 14, and that allowed Wellen to try and go for that unfortunately failed attempt and overtake for P2. I think regardless, it would have ended in an old stall finishing because he had a massive gap, and Heron was acting like a little bit of a rolling roadblock coming through turn 12 and turn 13 on that last lap. And that was an incredibly hectic race, and we'll run through the results here from a dramatic F4 Apex Racing Academy F4 championship meeting here at Spa. It lived up to my expectations because I was expecting it to be dramatic and exciting, and it was. And it's Oddstall taking the checkered flag, 1.3 seconds ahead there of Archie Heron in P2, with Harvey Jones rounding at your podium. That 1.3, nearly 1.4 second gap between those front two is not representative of how hard the racing was from start to finish tonight. That's Spetskins finishing in fourth, Adriansons finishing in a pretty good P5. That's going to be Larson grabbing the win of the AM drivers. My apologies, the Pro-Am drivers. He finishes in P6, right ahead of his Pro-Am adversary Alexander Michelson in P7. Vetty Wellen, after that contact at the later stages of the race, finishes in P8. Lorenzato in 9th. Jay Walsh finishes in 10th, with Tim Run down in 14th, which leads me to believe that the reason why Run was kind of going for an all-out, maybe actually, I think what it could have been was he got a penalty for incident points, and maybe that's the reason why he was a bit upset with Jay Walsh after the checkered flag. But it leads to Jay Walsh grabbing P10 and grabbing that win in the AM category here. Wellen and Lorenzato finish ahead of him. That rounds out your top 10. Then it's going to be Calix Poon after making contact in the early stages. He has an upsetting result to finish in P11. Mark Van Dalen in P number 12. And then looking through the rest of the field is going to be Burgess, Run, Adriansons, and Gordon. Adrianson having issue with Gordon actually not taking the start of this race. And wow, that rounds out your 16 car grid field, whatever you want to call it, the results from that A main race. What a dramatic meeting here at Spa. It was hectic from start to finish. I gotta admit, from my perspective, I didn't even get to finish my first glass of water, even though I thought I was going to be chugging water left, right, and center, having to do a broadcast all on my own. However, I didn't even get a chance to touch my glasses of water throughout a vast majority of this race, just because of how exciting it was. And if you're in the mood for some exciting racing, Apex Racing TV has got you covered. We've got racing all around the clock, and we've actually got some stuff coming up from the world of Assetto Corsa Competizione, so that will be pretty interesting. Actually, I'm just as I was going to look at the Apex Racing TV YouTube channel to see what's coming up. Tim Run explaining that he had a slowdown that he didn't serve before the line. That could explain why he dropped back, so that's a shame there for the driver, who I believe will still be at the front of the AM standings regardless, but still not the best meeting he had in mind. But touching on the subject of some of the action that we've got coming up here on Apex Racing TV, whether it be the Racing Unleashed iRacing Challenger League, Challenge number 1, they don't call it round 1, they call it Challenger number 1, that's very impressive there, at Hockenheim. That's coming up tomorrow at 8 a.m., so if you're in the mood for some early racing here on Apex, that's 8 a.m. Eastern, I should clarify. That will be some pretty good racing there, I guess, in the early afternoon in the UK. The race I'm looking forward to, without a question or shadow of a doubt, is ARA Esports Weekend Warriors runoffs, with the Week 13 virtual runoffs, the 40th edition at Okayama. That's going to be pretty exciting, with the Formula Ford cars being held with a 60-car grid, I believe, in the rain. That is going to be a must-watch here tomorrow on Apex Racing TV. And we've also got the return of the Radical Sim Racing Championships, whether it be the European one that I am not a part of. However, my colleague, well, not colleague here for this broadcast, but colleague usually on the series, Aaron Smith, is a part of, along with Sam Fitzpatrick. That's a pretty good series if you'd like to tune in to that race at Sebring, along with the Americas round later on that evening that I will be a part of as well. That's going to be the Rick Matek World Challenge on Monday, which I won't be a part of because I usually do the officiating for that. But we have one driver waiting in the interview waiting room, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, their name is Dutch UK Racing. So we'll try and pretend like we know who this driver is, and yeah, we'll bring him in to the commentary booth here. Alrighty, that was a very dramatic race from start to finish. Thank you so much for joining us, whoever you may be, because we all know what you are, or who you are, I should say. Just talk us through your race and talk us through who you are.
Oh, hello, I'm Mark van Dalen.
Ah, alright, there we go. You were involved in a great fight all throughout this race, whether it be the heat races or that very dramatic A main, so just talk us through this meeting here at Spa.
Chaos. Yeah. The draft is so big here, so you can't really pull away from somebody, and occasionally going 3 wide doesn't help.
I'll tell you what, seeing you drivers go 3 wide and even 4 wide at times, that is quite impressive. I thought I was going to have several different heart attacks throughout that broadcast that we just did, but just talk us through the challenges of driving this F4 car here at Spa.
The challenge is just you're on a knife edge basically the whole lap, especially because you don't want to lose the toe to anybody in front of you, and in some cases you just have to work with each other. The last race, unfortunately, I made a mistake in the hairpin in Le Source, and I was all the way at the back, and Calix Poon was coming from behind me, past me, and he was like a second quicker than me a lap, or over a second quicker than me. But just staying in the toe, I could, catch along with him. And yeah, I think I actually was involved in that 4 wide battle as well on the on the Camel Straight. You just have to give each other a little bit of room, which is quite difficult. But yeah, that's the main thing.
Just staying in the slipstream is just so important. I saw that throughout this the qualifying session, or whether it be the 4 races that we just had this evening. But the next round that we have here for this season is a little bit different, heading to Rudskogen, which is a lot less straight line dependent. However, you do have those long start-finish straightaways in that straightaway exiting, I believe it's turn 3, right at the very start of the lap. So what are your thoughts heading into that race?
I'm a bit hesitant for that one because I don't really know that track that well. I know the track a little bit, but I haven't raced there many times, so I know there's not a great long straight there, but I think it's not that wide at some places, and a bit of twitchy corners as well. So like I said, if we just need to give each other a bit of space. My teammate actually, Tim Rutten, was for some reason in the A final, which I still don't understand how that happened, because clearly the people in front of him who were in the top 4 positions were fighting so much while they're actually going into the A final. I didn't really understand that bit, and taking each other out, making my teammate actually making the A final. So yeah, close racing, but you have to be sometimes a bit smarter. If you're in the top 4 and you're going through to the A final, don't fight. But yeah.
Alrighty, well, Mark van Dalen, thank you so much for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you'd like to thanks or shout out?
Yeah, thanks to Year One. Great team to be with. Really helpful. Also, Graham Sesford, the sort of backbone of the team, pushing us forward all the time. So yeah, that's about it.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for joining us here in the commentary booth, and thank you for your insight here into this race at Spa. Fingers crossed that we see you next time out at Rudskogen.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Alrighty, we hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us here. And that was Mark van Dalen joining us here in the commentary booth, giving us some insight into Spa and giving us some insight as to what we'll expect from Rudskogen next time out. Speaking of, if you'd like to tune into that broadcast, it will be the same time at the same place here on Apex Racing TV with the same action, and hopefully my colleague joining me for that race. But as for tonight's broadcast, I think that'll just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Josh Wilkie doing a fantastic job in the virtual production hall, or not going insane having to listen to my voice for the past hour and a half, and the poor, unfortunate remnants of my vocal cords. I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all again once I get my vocal cords replaced in 1 week's time.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com.